G'day everyone, it's Alan here from Fishing Mad. Now, one of the questions that I receive all the time, especially from those that are new to kayaking and boating, is how can I forecast safe weather conditions for fishing? I even get people messaging me asking me to check the weather conditions for them before they go out, just so they can be sure. Now, I don't get frustrated at these questions because these are things that you learn with experience and fishing with other anglers. Now, I remember years ago when I bought my first fishing kayak. It was a cheap entry-level yak, and I was new to the sport and I wasn't quite sure on how to do some of this stuff. My first kayak fishing session out on my own was a disaster. I went out in pretty unsafe conditions and I ended up tipping the kayak about 2 kilometers offshore. I lost a lot of fishing gear, but more importantly, I put myself in a dangerous situation which was completely avoidable. That, however, was the light bulb moment that I realized I had to learn how to predict safe weather conditions for fishing. Now, learning to predict these weather conditions is something that you must learn. The good news is it's very easy to do once you know what you're looking for. In this video, I'm going to walk you through simple techniques to identify safe weather conditions using free tools on your PC and smartphone. Now, these tools are not 100% accurate, but they provide you with enough data to make a confident and informed decision on whether you should go out on the water or not. Now, there are 4 key areas that you should always check before going out, and I refer to these as the 4 W's. You have wind, waves, weather, and warnings. Now, to check these 4 W's, you're going to need some tools, and there are multiple weather apps on the market, and most of them are free. You have Medeye by the Bureau of Meteorology, you have Willys Weather, you have Seabreeze, you have Fish Ranger, you have Windy, you have Windfinder, and there's quite a few other ones out there on the market as well. One thing that you need to remember is that most of these apps get their data from the same source. And in Australia, that's typically from the Bureau of Meteorology or the Medeye app. It's completely up to you which one you use, but personally, I like to use a combination of Medeye and Willys Weather. So now that we have these free tools at our fingertips, let's go back to those 4 W's, which is wind, waves, weather, and warnings. Now, what I really want to do is focus first on wind, because the wind strength and the wind direction are probably the 2 most important factors on whether conditions are going to be flat or choppy. Now, when I go out, I'm generally in my Hobie kayak or I'm in my small runabout boat. So I need to be quite cautious in what weather conditions I go out, especially if I'm fishing on my own. Now, there are 2 key factors I'm always looking for. First is the wind strength, which is ideally under 15 knots. And secondly is the wind direction, which is ideally coming from behind me out to sea. Now, that's really important because when the wind is coming from the land out to sea, it will typically flatten the waves. If the wind is coming from sea out to where you are, then what you're going to find is the conditions are going to be quite choppy. What we'll do, let's jump onto Medeye now so I can visually explain to you how this works in detail. Okay, so what I do is I jump to www.bom.gov.au/Australia/Medeye. And the first thing I generally do is I put in my local area. I've put in Altona, and you can see once I do that, I get this little pinpoint here, and it shows that, that's on the outer skirts of Port Phillip Bay. Obviously, to the right of that, you've got Western Port, and out here, you've got the Bass Strait. So there's lots of helpful information on this screen. And if you look on the left-hand side, we've got rain forecast, wind forecast, wave forecast, and a few other things as well that are very helpful. So you'll notice that if I select one of these things, and I'm going to run through wind first, but when I do select that, you see that it's going to give you a forecast for generally the next 7 or so days. You can see it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so on. And it breaks these up by every 3 hours. So you got 10 a.m., 1 a.m., 4 p.m., and so forth. So
These are obviously the conditions for right now, but if I really wanted to do, obviously I do a lot of my fishing on weekends. I could click on Saturday morning at 7 a.m. for instance and have a look at the forecast there. So I'll go back to what it is now. Now, as I said earlier, the first thing that I generally check for is wind strength. And when I'm out on my boat or my kayak, I'm generally looking for conditions between that 10 to 15 knots. So you'll see here under wind forecast, I always make sure I've got wind speed and direction by knots as my selected option. And then when I do that, you'll see on the right hand side, you do get this legend, which is a wind speed, and it's categorized in colors. So obviously these lower ones here in white and blue, they're your ideal conditions. And then obviously as you move up in the greens and the reds, that's when that wind strength is, a lot stronger and, not so good. So if we have a look here at this map, you can see that, the wind strength is predicted to be, sort of between that 10 to 15 knots on Monday morning. And, if we were able to, again, flick back over to Saturday, you can see this is absolutely ideal. We're talking between 0 and 5 and 5 and 10 knots in our area. So Saturday morning at this stage, which is, quite a bit in advance, it looks like it's going to be really, really good. So let's go back to Monday. Now, the other thing that I said was the wind direction is also critically important. So you can see here at the moment, the wind is coming pretty much from the east side. So when you've got areas such as, say, Dandenong and Mornington, and the wind direction is heading over to the west side to areas such as Williamstown and Werribee. So if I was launching in from Altona on this day, that's actually the worst wind direction possible, because that basically means that the wind is coming from sea out to land. And what you're going to find is that the swell is significantly higher. Let's have a look again on the Saturday morning at 7 a.m. And look, these are pretty much perfect launching conditions from this area here. So I've got the wind from the land going out to sea, and you're going to find that those swells would be actually really low. And honestly, these is kind of like the perfect conditions where you've got between 0 and 5 knots and the wind from your back out to sea. So you'd be pretty excited if you saw that. So now the other thing that I do like to check is the swell height. And what you do is you just click on the wave forecast, and I like to have total wave height. And again, you'll see you've got the next 4 days predicted. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, again in every 3-hour blocks. And again, on the right hand side, you've got a legend where, ideally you want to be in these green areas. If you've got a bigger boat, maybe in some of these blue areas, but you certainly wouldn't entertain going out, unless you had a really big, proper boat in these color areas. So you can see again for Monday, you can see we've got, this dark green. So they're predicting wind swells between 0.5 meter and 1 meter, which probably isn't too bad. And again, if you were launching on this side of town, say at Mornington, and we know that those winds were heading in this direction, which is exactly what I was saying, right? So with the wind direction being on this side, going out to this side, you can see that the swell is lower over here than what it is here. So that's really, really important. And the other thing to remember is obviously, the entrance in Port Phillip Bay and the entrances of Western Port make these areas a little bit protected. And the Bass Strait is always going to be significantly more wavier than these two areas here. Now, as I said earlier, there are other really good apps and websites to get some of this information. You've got williesweather.com.au. You can select your location. And you will notice that the wind forecast is supplied by the Bureau of Meteorology, as I said earlier. But this is a really handy tool for looking at the strength of the wind forecast. And you can also tick on real time as well to compare the wind strength actual versus the predicted. There are other good websites too. You've got seabreeze.com.au. This is another really handy tool by selecting your location. And then you can have a really good look again at that wind direction, wind strength and swell. Other similar ones are fishranger.com.au. The free part of this is also really good for selecting your location and then having a really good look at those predicted wind strengths. If you're after something a bit more graphical, then windy.com is a really good one at really highlighting specific areas and what the wind direction is doing. Likewise for windfinder.com, another really good graphical representation. So that's covered our first two areas of wind and waves. And now what we're going to do is going to look at the third area, which is weather. And what we mean by this is just general weather conditions. So looking at temperature, UV levels, fog, rain, thunderstorms, tides, and light. So you can use any of those apps or websites to do this. Typically, I'll probably just use Willie's Weather to do this. So for starters, if we have a look at the temperature, so we can see today has got a low predicted of 6 and a high predicted of 15. And we can see that there's a little bit of morning fog predicted. However, it's going to be mainly a sunny day and, reasonably low winds with 15 to 20 kilometer winds predicted. Now, it is really important that you do look at the lows and the highs each day, particularly the lows in winter and the highs in summer, just to make sure that, you're dressing properly, and if it's going to be like 1 degree in winter, you just want to make sure you're prepared. So in summer, the other thing I like to look at is UV levels. So at the moment, we're in the middle of winter, so we're expecting this would be low or moderate. But if you're going to go out on a really hot day, have a look at those UV levels. Rain is obviously a very important one. Particularly, it's not very pleasant being out there caught in the rain on a kayak or boat. You can see today has got 0 predicted rain. However, later on the week, they are predicting, there's probably a mild chance that they are going to get some level of rain. Tides is another really important one. I think this is probably more important for kayakers who are launching. If you've ever tried launching on the peak of low tide, it's a nightmare. So you can see today, the peak of high tide, is at around 7:15 in the morning, and the peak of low tide is around 1:15. So again, if you're fishing a really shallow area or if you're launching a kayak, that's something that's really important. And the other last thing that's really important is just to take the note of first light and last light. If you don't like fishing in the dark, you want to be careful to make sure that by about 6:10 it's going to be completely dark. So there's some key areas there to look at. And the final area is warnings, and you can have a look at these by visiting www.bom.gov.au/vic/warnings. And these are just alerts of any extreme weather conditions that you need to be aware of. For instance, at the moment, you can see there are strong winds for West Coast and Central Coast, and just a good idea to check, especially if you're going well offshore.
And remember, the weather is constantly changing, so recheck the forecast on your PC or smartphone before you head out. And just because the conditions were predicted to be good a day or two ago doesn't mean that they still will be. So check again for good measure. And as I said earlier, these apps and these tools are not 100% accurate, but they will provide you with a lot of helpful information to make an informed decision. Now, I've had days that are predicted to be flat and calm, and then when you arrive, they're choppy and unpleasant. And what you need to do is make your own judgment and don't go out if the conditions are not suitable. Always put safety first and use some common sense. Now, guys, I hope you have found this fishing tip helpful. Please don't forget to leave some comments, give us a like, and of course, subscribe to the channel. I'm Alan. Thanks for watching Fishing Mad, and until next time, good fishing, everyone.